Good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming today. I really appreciate you taking the time. And also, again, I made the same comment at the last members forum that we had. I really appreciate the support for county championship cricket. Everybody at the club appreciates it. The players appreciate it when we get decent numbers out in force. And what a performance we've had from the team over the last couple of the days. It's been a fantastic season so far. And to give the county champions, show them a bit of generous northern hospitality has been great the last couple of days. So no, I really appreciate all of your support. It means a lot. And for taking the time to come and to have a members forum. As you know, we've called a members forum. Communication from the ECB has been a bit up and down over the last few weeks on the high performance review. As soon as the publication was announced, released by the ECB, we shared that immediately with members on channels, and we wanted to have a members forum as soon as possible in the next game, the last game of the season, to give members an opportunity. Hopefully you've had an opportunity to read the document, albeit it is quite a lengthy and quite a dry document. And then it gives us an opportunity to have a good discussion about that today and for you to ask questions. The way it's going to work today is we're going to hear from Mark Chilton, our Director of Cricket, and we're going to hear from Sam Byrne, our lead physiotherapist, specifically on comments on the high performance, on their initial reaction to the high performance review. And then the panel, plus obviously Glenn and Dane's going to join us, I think, in a bit, will be open themselves to answer any questions that you may have. And genuinely, you can ask any question you like on the high performance review, but what I would ask is, one thing that happened towards the end of the last, in fact I think it was the last but one, because I actually think this is the third forum we've had on this subject, is I think on the first one we ended up getting quite a lot of people putting their hand up at the end to then give their opinion on what the domestic schedule would be. What I'm asking is, obviously every person in the world can have an opinion on the domestic schedule. We wouldn't have time to get everybody's view on that. Obviously, it's the ECB's role to propose what a domestic schedule is to look like, and then it's for us as a club, including our membership, to review any proposal and to consider whether those changes are appropriate or not. But we haven't got time to discuss infinite possibilities of what a domestic schedule should or could look like. But apart from that, please ask any question. Cricket department are here. This has to be, as we said at the start, our response to this is not going to be a commercial one. It's going to be a cricket-led response, which I think you would expect and agree to. So I think, without further ado, hand over to Mark, who's going to give his initial reactions and thoughts on the published high-performance review proposals.
Okay, thanks, Daniel. Evening, everybody. So yeah, I just probably reiterate what Daniel said towards the end there, is that even amongst the panel, we have differing views on certain aspects. So I think, we don't have time to sort of go into in-depth on what people think about what should and shouldn't happen. And I think the other things that are important to state at the start are that whether we like it or not, this review was undertaken with two caveats based around 18 counties remaining and no conversation around the 100. So I know the 100 is a contentious issue for a lot of you, and in some aspects it is for us at times as well. But I think, again, getting into a debate over the 100 and where it sits is a bit fruitless, to be perfectly honest. So I think that's important to lay out as well. I think from our perspective, most of what I wanted to say was out in the review, in the press release that came out at the start of this week. I think I can just build on some aspects of the detail in that. There were elements of the high performance review that we were in support of, that we think it's a pretty good piece of work by the consultants that the ECB have taken lead on to do the work, and there's a lot of aspects of it that we think are very good, particularly around the player welfare, which I know Sam is going to touch on. But overall, there was an overriding feeling from all of us, to be honest with you, that although we had slightly differing views on what the season might look like, as Daniel's alluded to, We were fairly adamant that the structure of the county championship was something that at this point we had reservations about. And the key aspects of that, which were in the statement, were that we feel a top division of 6 will encourage a little bit more short-term thinking around how teams develop and pick and select teams. My personal view is that one of our core objectives, and it is one of our core objectives that's set by the board, is to produce local talent and to continue to produce local talent. And we do that for, we used to do that for 2 reasons, we now do that for 3 reasons. We do that to produce a strong Lancashire team, which is all in our vested interest that are in the room. But by nature of the global market that exists within cricket, that leads to opportunities in international cricket for players. And now the third change, massive change in the last 5 years, has been the eruption of global franchises. But really one of our core objectives as a club is to develop talent in the local areas to play for Lancashire, for England and beyond. And really that is probably at the core of one of our reservations around the proposal of the county championship. We're also of the opinion that I know there's a lot of feeling in the room about this, that we don't necessarily think playing less cricket is appropriate. We just firmly believe that there needs to be an improved schedule. So again, I'll pass to Sam for a little bit of detail on this, that the current schedule from our perspectives, with the experience that we have and the expertise that we have in our areas around development of cricket, high performance in cricket, player welfare, injuries, all the stuff that comes with what our jobs entails on a day-to-day basis, has been made extremely challenging in a season like we have had this year. And we'll touch on some examples of that, I'm sure, and there may be some further questions on that. And I will take the opportunity now to say how proud I am as the leader of the cricket department with what Glenn and his team have done and all the staff to have competed like we have across all competitions, with the uncertainty and the disruption that exists within our county season. That's something that we have to accept. We know it's going to carry on, but that is, it's a key part of what we're having to deal with. So we feel very strongly that the current schedule is not suitable to get the best out of our players as often as we can. And so if you're talking about raising standards and the intention of the ECB to try and raise standards across the board and therefore for the England cricket team, we're in support of them trying to do that and what that might look like. And therefore we are open to some change. However, as I've suggested, we don't necessarily think that is just a reduction certainly in 4-day cricket. We probably feel, I think, I'll try and be as honest as we can tonight, we probably feel that the number of days played, there has to be some slight reduction in that, just to open up the schedule, and we feel like there needs to be further debate over how that, certainly the 4-day and the county championship structure looks like, to allow enough space in between fixtures for our players to get the appropriate rest and recovery to perform at as higher intensity as possible. So we didn't have too much debate about that amongst ourselves, which hopefully should give you some comfort that we are not just sitting here thinking we need to play less cricket. We might need to play a small amount less, but we're not sitting here going, right, yeah, 10 games, that's it. We don't feel like that. We just feel like we want more debate around what that structure looks like to open it up. So the detail around that, which you've read, we would probably be in favour of 50 moving to the front, and we would, the T20, to be honest, the T20 we can give or take. It doesn't make a huge amount of difference to us. Certainly doesn't make any real commercial difference whether we play 14 or 10 games. So it's that debate and I suppose further analysis over the 4-day games that we're interested in having some more discussion over. And in addition to that, I suppose one of my views, and I'm sure some of the panel will share it as well, is the high performance review for me has just focused too much on the schedule as the problem. And really a high performance review in my mind should take into lots of other aspects about trying to raise standards. There's been no discussion around what sits underneath first team cricket and how we can raise standards with our players in second team. There's been no discussion around how we raise standards across the officiating, which you'd have probably read my statement a couple of weeks ago. You know, there are certain aspects of it that we think we just need to dig a little bit deeper and start to challenge on. And I'm sure a lot of other counties will probably feel like that. And I suppose that, you know, to sort of sum up before I pass over to Sam, I suppose there's also been a feeling that the review's been very much led about what is right for England, for the England team, and I don't think it's quite considered what is right for the counties enough. We accept that the intention is to raise standards across that international team, because, as I said at the start, that is one of the reasons we exist, is to provide players for that team. But I don't think they have quite considered the counties and, you know, everyone who's sat here today. I don't think they've quite given that enough consideration about the impact of some of those decisions. So we support the intention, but we just want to ask more questions about the detail and dig a little bit deeper. I think that's pretty much all I wanted to say.
Can I just ask you one question, Mark, before we hand over to Sam, is just so everybody's clear. Is it correct to say that you and your colleagues in the cricket department believe that 13 or 14 first-class games is okay, but on the basis that we play during August, because there is a concentration issue at the moment in terms of the start of the season particularly?
Well, as it currently stands, given what we said at the start, you know, you alluded to and my opening statement, if the 100 is an immovable beast, then really there is no other option. You know, I don't see really how we can try and figure everything else out to allow for there has to be some red ball cricket played underneath that 100 to allow us and what we think is the right amount for player development. So yeah, you know, I agree with that. I mean, I think it's important you hear from Sam, because the players are at the core of this. They're the ones who are going out and taking the field and working really hard to represent Lancashire. And I think Sam will do a really good job at giving a player's perspective and some of the challenges that the players have to put up with the current schedule. And I know there'll be people out there who think, you know, crack on with it. The amount of cricket is fine, but I'm hoping that, you know, you can listen to some of the information tonight and actually, you know, take that away with you as a serious consideration as what we're working with on a daily basis and how we are trying to get the best out of our players all the time.
Thanks, Mark. I'd echo what Mark says. I think this year has been probably the most challenging season, the way our fixtures have fallen, of any season that I remember, and the wider sports science and management team would say. Having said that, speaking to the players directly, I don't think any of them are arguing particularly for a huge reduction, as Mark said, in cricket. But what they do need is time, and adequate time between games to properly prepare. And I think that's really key on a number of fronts. They need time to recover between games and rest. Recovery from a spinal health point of view, from fast bowlers, their lumbar spines need days between bowling, so you don't get this breakdown of fast bowlers that we've seen at the moment. There's a lot of fast bowlers unavailable for England. They need time to sleep. You know, you probably just see the games, but we see the travel days in between. But, you know, earlier in the season in May, right in the thick of things, we had, I know Mark alluded to it previously, but we had a T20 game at Trent Bridge on a Tuesday night, I think it was. We didn't finish or get away from there till gone 10 o'clock. We travelled back to Old Trafford. Mark kindly put up most of the players in the hotel, so they didn't have to travel back, you know, an hour away, some of them. But they don't often then get to sleep until, you know, 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, because their adrenaline going from the game. They don't sleep properly, and then, you know, the fixtures had us playing again the next day at 3:30 here at Old Trafford. So we're playing and completing 2 T20 games within 24 hours. And I remember speaking to Mark at the time and thinking, you know, that isn't elite, that isn't high performance, and it certainly isn't sustainable for the players. And you know, that's a real challenge for them. So they're two key things. I think they also need significant time to do their strength and conditioning. We spend a huge amount of time, you know, getting them as fit and as strong as we can. And with the current gaps in the schedule, whether it be 3 days or 2 days between a county championship, it just isn't enough time to travel either back from a game or to the next game, recover properly on the day after a game, do their strength and conditioning work in between games, and then also for the coaches get meaningful practice, and for the players into players between games. So I guess they're the key reasons why we want so when they are going out on the field, what they are producing at the heart of this review is high performance and sustainable high performance. I think as a management team and a sports science team, we would back our players to be as fit as any players in the country. The players and the staff put a huge amount of pride in that, and a huge amount of work goes in from November all the way through to March to get them as fit and as strong and to be as ready, prepared for the season as they possibly can be. But the way the schedule is and the way our fixtures in particular fell this year, we just haven't had the time to sustain that fitness work. So by nature, then you lose fitness, you get deconditioning happening, and they've gone from being really strong and powerful and fit players to, by the end of May, they're on their knees really at the end of 6 games in 6 weeks. And that deconditioning certainly leads to injuries, and unfortunately it can only take a matter of days or sometimes weeks for an injury to develop that then can rule a fast bowler out for 9 or 10 months out with a stress-related injury. So that's echoing what Mark said. We're not looking for a huge reduction in the number of days, but a better structure and a better schedule for the players.
Thank you. Before we go to questions, which Dane, you weren't here earlier, I think we were going to go to questions, and obviously anybody can ask any question of the panel, but is there anything specific that either Glenn, yourself or Dane wanted to add before we went to questions?
From my perspective, Mark and Sam have covered just about all of it, to be honest. I would echo Mark's thoughts, really. We want to play cricket and we want to play as much as we can, but times move on and the players want to be given the opportunity to be at the best. And that's really all we're looking for. Obviously, the new proposal that's come out doesn't fit with what we think is appropriate at this stage.
And just one more thing, what Sam said is 100% correct with the fatigue that you get physically and stuff, but I just want to add one thing is also the mental fatigue that we go through as players. A lot of the time, these games that we play are so intense, and we always want to be at our best performance. We want to be at a high level and producing wins and really, trying to be at the best, but they do take a toll on the players mentally and physically as well. So the mental drain is quite a lot in these type of games, especially when you have so much cricket going on as well. And Sam's 100% correct. When we had that a couple of games before where we're chopping and changing between formats, we're playing back-to-back games, we're moving around different hotels, different grounds, all that type of stuff as well. So that mentally it does take a toll on the guys, which obviously we don't want as well, because it's hugely important that we have guys at their peak physical and mental conditions to perform well for the team and for the county.
Just before we go to questions, I don't expect you to get all your violins out at this point. But it is a real problem, and I think this is one of the reasons we have an opportunity to try and explain this from our perspective. We're not trying to look for feel sorry for us or this, that, and the other. It's very real, and it's very different to when it was when I was playing 10 or 15 years ago. The intensity and expectation around what we as a management group are expecting our players on a day-to-day basis, but also if you think about the global marketplace of cricket, there's quite a lot at stake for these guys now, and they know that, and that's not their fault. They are working in a potentially very lucrative market, and that ramps up the intensity and the pressure of everything that they do. So I don't think it's relevant to say, well, back in 2009 we did this amount of, and we did this and we did that, because the game's changed and the global market of cricket has changed. And I think it's important that we as a group understand that and acknowledge some of the challenges that the players are under, and the staff, to be fair. I spend a lot of time trying to figure out, we've got staff welfare as well. It's very, very important. Like I said, I don't want us to sit here and think poor us, because we have a fantastic job, but that's very real.
Thanks, Mark. I think before we go to questions, I think it is worth reiterating that actually, if you look at, with this being the third members forum on this subject, actually the first two were before the high performance proposals were published by the ECB. And if you go back to the first one, I think we did in the point, and if you get a chance on YouTube, go and look and watch again what Mark talked about and what Sam's colleague Dave Roberts talked about, is actually before we even saw what the ECB's response was, what everybody was saying even at that point was the current schedule from a concentration perspective doesn't work from a player welfare perspective. So I think without further ado, let's go to questions. Phil, have you got your roving mic? So please put your hand up and Phil will come to you with a mic if you have any questions. And said, please, if you can avoid giving a statement on what your preferred schedule is and actually ask us a question, that would be appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. You can hear me? It's the issue of county games in August. I'm well aware, and I'm sure many members are well aware, that even our guest today, Surrey, I think lost or had to apply 15 cricketers to the 100. I'm not sure they would appreciate finding another 14 men to fulfill a county fixture and then to challenge for the championship. And I feel the same for Lancashire. I wouldn't like Lancashire to lose 10 to 15 cricketers for the 100 and then to fulfill county matches 4 points when I want us to win the county championship. And I'm sure everyone in this room would prefer that. So that's a dilemma which I'm sure you gentlemen are going to have to somehow resolve with the ECB.
I can try and take that. I suppose all clubs will be in a different position with this, but the one thing I'd say to give the county championship a chance through August would be that because of the nature of the players that are selected for the 100, did actually leave Lancashire with a very strong 4-day team. So in our interest, we could have fielded a really strong 4-day team through that period. Other counties may say, well, that's not going to work for us. But again, in the interest of developing our younger players and the strength of our pathway and the potential strength and current strength that we have within the squad, we would back ourselves to put out a competitive team during that period right now. This is one of the issues with all this. There's going to be 18 different perspectives on this, and they've not really been sought to a high level of detail. And as Mark said, the overriding point of the research was what's best for the England team right now, not what's best for the whole game. But just go back to that, we could put out a good side in August.
Just to support that, I think you're right, it is a dilemma. It's actually a maths issue, and I think we discussed this at the first members forum, is for the reasons that were outlined by David Roberts and now with Sam as well, is that, you know, those 6 games at the start of the season back to back effectively broke our bowlers, and Tom Bailey was, I think you said, was operating at about 70% in the last game. And I think this is where we have a challenge with the maths perspective, is if you don't play county championship cricket in August, there is a bare fact. People might not like what I'm about to say, but I'm just giving you a maths fact based on what's been said here, is that the only way you can have, I believe, 14 county championship matches is to play during August. But as you quite rightly say, you know, there are some counties that would strongly object to that. You know, and also we develop a lot of red ball players. If you look at Somerset, who develop a lot of white ball players, they would have had significant challenges during that period as well. And if you go to the heart of the current proposal, they were suggesting 11 county championship games and 3 first-class games that were outside of the county championship in August. Again, it's not a perfect solution, but if it's almost like if we want 14 first-class games, we would want to have county championship games in August, but we are 1 of 18 and you need 12 of 18 to vote for something. So this is where we probably need to consider, are we prepared to accept as a membership a compromise that says 11 championship games and 3 first-class games in August to get to retain our 14 first-class games overall, or not? And, you know, if not, then we currently do have a problem with the current status quo on the schedule. So that, as I said, there is not a perfect answer here. Sorry, did you want to?
Well, my only additional point to it is I accept the disruption through the 100 is more significant, but we're also dealing with disruption throughout the season to our 4-day teams, and so are other clubs. So, you know, there's no Luke Wood and Phil Salt playing out there today based on them going to an international series. We had people missing through the middle of the part of the season. So it is sort of one of the challenges that we have to face, knowing that throughout the season, this is where the game's changed massively. We know that from April to September, trying to map out who's going to be available over what period takes some, you know, you need a crystal ball at times to think what might happen and how you're going to fill those gaps. Completely take your point that underneath the 100, there is much more significant impact, particularly for the stronger sides. But are there ways that we can be creative around the points that are given out during that period? You know, are they distributed? I don't know. Have a think about how the distribution of the points might work, depending on how many players you're missing. You know, these are the sort of questions that we would just like to pose back to the ECB.
Do we have any other questions? This gentleman here.
Seeing you talk about international cricket and domestic cricket, would it not be an idea to split the ECB to one look after the international bit, including the 100, and the other bit to look after county cricket?
That's a very good question. I think one of the questions that came out recently is, should the ECB be a regulator or a promoter? Because currently it's doing both of those functions, and that is a question that is currently being considered. I think we now have a chairman of the ECB in Richard Thompson who loves first-class cricket and county cricket, and he will absolutely grab hold of this particular challenge and consider that. Any other questions, please? I think there's a chap here in the blue jumper.
Everything seems to be primarily thinking of asking the counties what they're going to do with the county championship. Is there any mileage at all of the counties going back to the ECB and saying, look, you've said the 100 is totally unmovable, but actually, I'm sure most county members will say, actually, we would love it to be moved. Why is it sacrosanct? So is there any point of the counties going back to the ECB and saying, look, you need to rethink that?
Unfortunately not in the short term. They've effectively signed a broadcast agreement for the 100 to be extended to 2028 in its current slot, which, and obviously as I explained I think at the first, whether I agree with it or not, or whether we agree with it or not, but that agreement determines the distributions that come from the ECB to all 18 counties. So that's not something we can unravel at this point. But I do agree with your point, though, about the whole position at the moment is the ECB have run a consultation process. They've put out a proposal. 15 of the 17 points, let's just be clear about this. I think a lot of people are under the illusion that this is a domestic schedule review. Actually, it wasn't. It was a high performance review looked at through the England player lens. 15 of the 17 recommendations have been accepted and endorsed by the ECB board and will be implemented. Things like, I think, use of the Kookaburra ball or changes to points to look at pitches. Let's not talk about pitches after Essex. But 2 of them are related to changes to the domestic schedule. And as you've seen with our statement, the cricket department are currently uncomfortable with that, and there's a number of other counties that have also come out and said that they're uncomfortable with the current 2 recommendations that relate to the change to the schedule. So at the moment, that will not achieve, based on what we've read in the press, that will not achieve a vote of 12 out of 18 chairs to move forward. So what happens now is the counties will be going back to the ECB to discuss and negotiate and look at what compromises are available in terms of the ECB's proposed changes to the domestic schedule. So whilst we can't challenge the 100 because the contracts have been signed by the ECB and the distributions that we get as a result, what we can do as a county is engage, which our chair is doing with the other chairs, to say, what are the things that we can think about? And that's one of the reasons we wanted to run, have the members forum today, so that we can get members' views on this. Okay, so Is there any other next question? This chap here.
Hi. This is basically a question to the panel in general. If the county championship remains at 14 games, which I think most of us want, what about the suggestion of reducing the number of group games in the T20? And with the Royal London, what about going back to a knockout like we used to have with the old Gillette Cup, which was very, very successful and very popular? What about doing that instead of having all these Royal London games, which obviously are adding to the burden on the players?
Yeah, I mean, as I tried to lay out at the start, I appreciate the question, but really I don't think this is a debate about what we could and couldn't do about the schedule, because we will all just see that slightly differently. My personal opinion is that we should be playing 50 over cricket at the start of the season, and we should be playing 6 to 8 games of it. That's what I think. But it doesn't mean that, ultimately, we have sympathy, and I certainly have sympathy with your plight, and that we don't want to see a big reduction in county championship cricket. But I can't see a solution to this if there is not a degree of compromise. We've pushed back at the ECB around their proposal, and I think we as a club and as a membership have to just try and take on board the information that we're trying to convey today, ask the questions that you want to ask. I'm very happy to answer most questions on this sort of stuff, to try and ultimately then say, right, well, as a group now, where can we pull the county and the ECB a bit closer together? Otherwise, we're just going to end up in a we're going to have nowhere to go, and the worst thing that can happen for me is no change, because the current schedule is, as we've hopefully quite clearly explained, it's unworkable.
Just to quickly add to that as well is the maths is difficult. So I don't mean to be boring about the maths, but reducing T20s from 7 home to 5, for example, whether that's popular or unpopular from a commercial or a fan member perspective, that's 2 days or 4 days total compared to the number, when you're talking number of 4-day games. So the actual maths, I come back to the point, was unless we play first-class cricket in August, there is no way that we can achieve 14 games in the county championship, because what we've proven to now is it breaks our players if we try and squeeze 14 games in out and exclude August. I think everybody's accepting that doesn't work. The only way we can retain 14 first-class games is to play in August, and we have to find a way with the ECB of how we make that work.
I'm a lot older than I look, but when I started watching cricket, it was all 3-day county championship. Has that been on the table? Or you got any thoughts on that?
Just very quickly, I'd go the other way. And again, we're into an opinion debate really, but I would be in favour of possibly 5-day cricket. As a way of making sure we get the right number of days. If we'd played 5-day, you might have heard me say this last time, if we played 5-day cricket out here, we'd have got 2 or 3 more games over the line, and we'd be fighting for the championship today. Any other comments?
Everybody has been asked to compromise except the 100. All county cricket has been asked to compromise, but the 100 is not prepared to give anything, apparently. Even other cricket played against the 100, which I think is very unfair, really, because I do realise that county cricket, we have got to compromise, and we've got to find some kind of compromise situation. But that does mean the 100 giving up something, which I don't hear that they're doing. Also, I'd like to hear Sam's point of view. If he was conditioning coach for England, having to prepare fast bowlers for 2 months, playing all the test matches they're going to play next summer. It seems to be a ridiculous international schedule to compress all the test matches away from August. That seems absolutely madness.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's why you're seeing a lot of rotation happening across England teams, and at the moment they're effectively playing two teams, a white ball team and a test team, which stretches players and staff even more. So I think it's a real challenge, but no different to us. I think, 3 days between a 4-day game is only just enough. 4 days, 5 days really allows the chance for, like we spoke about, enough recovery, enough time for sleep and, rest and recovery for the players, time to top up on their strength and conditioning so they stay fit and they stay strong, and time for them to practice properly between games so that when they get on the field, they're going to give you the best of themselves and it is proper high performance.
Good evening, everybody. I want to praise Glenn for putting these young players in. But this club now is a good squad. And we're going to win this game because we're so far in advance. And getting 5 batting points in a day is just wonderful. 414 for 5 was a cracking effort, was that, I think. And I just want to praise you, Glenn, for you're doing such a good job. And look what a good player you were. Mark was a good player. Mark Chilton. Cracking bat. Oh, you were, Mark. There's no doubt about it.
What about Dane?
And Dane.
Sometimes.
I mustn't forget you, Dane. Sorry, Dane.
Thanks, Dave.
Now, please, are you going to give my mate, Stephen Croft, another 2-year contract? He's had a wonderful season. There's no doubt about it. He's a wonderful batter. Don't you think so, Glenn?
Yes, he is, yeah.
Are you going to give him one, please?
Thank you, David. We do need to move on, but thank you very much. Next question, please. This chap here in the white coat. I think we all need the white coats.
You might want to send for the white coat after my comment. I want to follow up on what's been said over there, and particularly with reference to the 3 or 4 day championship games, and I'll bring in Sam on this one, because, and I'll just go slightly to tangent also, there's been comment about the time taken to play a day of cricket, be it test match or county, time wasted between overs and all that. So if that could be improved and maybe another half hour on the county championship, it would be possible, I believe, subject to what Sam may think about player fatigue in this connection, to then revert to the 3-day cricket, because 4 days only 3-day cricket played over 4 days, my personal view. That would then free up in the schedule tremendously to achieve what we all want to achieve, and that is proper red ball cricket.
The only thing from a cricketing perspective is if you accept that professional sport moves on, in terms of fitness, tactics, the detail that goes into performance, I would agree that some cricket around the world, and in some circumstances, that the overrate's a little bit slow. But the cricket that I played, getting 16 overs an hour with seam bowling, giving due care and attention to the tactics that you're using and the effort that is needed nowadays, is a challenge. And how cricket used to be played, it's completely different. So I don't think that would create better cricket, and we are still talking about raising standards, and that has to be the way professional sport goes. You have to keep trying to get better, and I think if you're talking about playing 110 plus overs in a day, that there's real challenges with that if you're trying to keep standards improving.
My only addition to it is, I think whilst Test cricket is 5 days, I can't see how the ECB would look at a 3-day red ball fixture and think that is preparing people in the right way for 5 days. The way they're playing at the minute, you're right, they're over in 3 days. And if they shifted it to 4 days, then maybe we could go to 3 days. But while it's 5-day cricket, I can't see a strong debate for why 3-day cricket is preparing players for that sort of environment. That would be my view.
And if we played at Chelmsford, we could get it all done in 2 months. But chat here. Oh, sorry, there's a question here.
Does the sort of impact of the schedule chopping and changing between formats have any impact on high performance or player welfare?
Yes.
I think it's a real challenge for the players, particularly if you throw in the travel as well. I mean, in June this year, we had, I think, 3 T20 games and a 4-day game in 9 days, plus travel, and they were all away from home, one at Blackpool, and then certainly down south. And I remember at the time we played on some very flat pitches in the game at Gloucester, but we struggled to push for a win because I think the players were certainly fatigued through that period. So I think as Dane said, I think swapping formats is mentally challenging, but physically as well, because they're finishing late. They might have to travel on to the next venue. They're not sleeping. You know, they're chopping and changing hotel beds constantly, and you know, they wake up and they play another game and then move on again and then get ready for a 4-day game. So that can be a real challenge.
If you think, I suppose the other aspect I'm looking at there is there isn't a lot of time to review our performances at times. So take that example that Sam alluded to before. You know, if you think about other high-performing sports and where we're trying to drive this game forward, there would be a proper debrief after the game. You know, the coaches might sit down and really find some time to go into the detail of the game and have a look at how we can get a performance advantage going into that. How are you expected to do that when you're driving home on the motorway at 10 o'clock at night? I mean, often we are on the phone at 10 and 11 o'clock at night discussing the game, but that's not really what we should be working towards. So that, you know, they're one of the other reasons around the coaches to be able to do a proper review on the fixture and then prepare appropriately for the next game, so you can feel, you know, that you've ticked every box before you go again.
I don't profess to be a mathematician, but it seems to me having 14 3-day games is very similar to having 12 4-day games. Again, it seems to me that the high performance review is really an opening bid. They're going to move, we're going to have to move. So you'd be better just dropping one team out of the first division, or perhaps 2, to get you even numbers. So you're playing 12 games rather than 14 games.
All stuff that we would like to go and discuss. So you make a very valid point.
14 games is 56 days. You know, 11 5-day games is 55 days. So interestingly, that would be virtually the same amount of days, but you'd probably find Lancashire get more wins on that basis. Next question.
Thank you. Hi. Good evening, everyone.
1 second.
Is it me? I am a distant relative of a former county cricketer who could bowl a bit. The bit in question would be from 1946 season to 1964. This question is particularly to you, Sam. If I may, I'll quote you his workload for the season 1962 when he opened the bowling in his 39th year. He bowled 1,717 overs. He played 34 3-day matches. He took 172 wickets. And he then went and played in 5 benefit Sunday games. How the hell did he do it?
It's a good question. I think players have certainly progressed in terms of their physical capabilities, not from a bowling perspective necessarily, but from a fitness point of view. And we're asking them to bowl faster, longer, hit the ball further than we probably were then. I think technology's also moved on. I think if you scanned his back, he'd probably have a couple of stress fractures. And I think we're aware of them now, and we've got a duty of care to the players, not just for now, for their current well-being and health and fitness, but for their future careers, to look after them as future non-cricketers. So unfortunately, scans these days are super sensitive, and we don't send players for scans willy-nilly, but at the same time, if they do present with an issue or low back pain that your distant relative may have had, then we are obligated to act on that. So, and we know now that the fast bowlers are certainly developing stress fractures, stress reactions, and we need to look after them accordingly.
Question really more for Daniel. If the 100 is an immovable feast, and can we rule out any further expansion of it, either in number of teams or in terms of number of games into the schedule going forward? Because that's my real fear, really, is the expansion of franchise cricket. I respect all the views about fitness and number of games, things like that, but it's just the expansion of the game turning into a franchise game.
I think it's a really good question. I can only give you my personal opinion. At the end of the day, I'm not on the 100 board. I'm not even on the Manchester Originals board. So I can only give you a view, a personal opinion. I think it's without secret that the likes of Gloucestershire and Somerset would like to be involved. I think Welsh Fire is probably the number one problem that the 100 has to solve in terms of both performances and attendances. So I think there is pressure around what the ECB do with the South West Wales region. There is talk of possibly going down a route of increasing the teams, but as an administrator, my view would be, well, the IPL is now at a point where it's growing teams, it's growing the schedule, it's getting much longer, and one of the challenges is one of the reasons people originally want to go for a short format, short period competition with a limited number of teams can soon get diluted. And I think my view, if I was asked, would be we don't need additional teams or additional time taken out of the schedule. The 100 provides significant amount of broadcast revenue to the game. Do we really need more revenue from the game, but at the cost that has on the schedule? So my view would be no. And if I'm asked the question, I will give them my opinion. Phil, there's a chap here.
Thank you. Just to push you a little bit more on that, Daniel, I think what the question is really aiming at is not what you or us or we think about the 100, because the 100's happened to us, and none of us wanted it in this room, probably. None of us had a vote, none of us was consulted on it, but it's here and we'll live with it, that's fine. So who does have the power? Can the ECB, from what you know of the governance of the game, because you probably know more than anybody else in this room, can the ECB extend the 100 either in time or with number of teams at its own discretion? Is this a matter for the ECB, or do we as counties have a say at all in that happening?
It's a really good question, and I think it would come down to interpretation. On paper, I believe the ECB can make changes to its own tournament without recourse back to the counties. That's my initial reaction to your question. However, the Constitution was changed after the 100 vote specifically to mean that any change to domestic competitions would require a majority of 12 out of 18. So I think it would be a very, very interesting question sitting in a room with lawyers on interpretation, because on the one hand, I believe that the ECB has autonomy, but on the other, you would class the 100 as a domestic competition, and as such, any change to an existing domestic competition requires 12 out of 18 chairs to vote in favour of such a change. So I'm sorry if that sounds like a politician's answer, but I think it's a really good question. I don't know the straight answer, and I think there could be two different interpretations.
Well, Thanks very much. I just kept the microphone to come back because it wasn't really what I'd aimed to ask, but I just wanted to follow up on that gentleman's question. What I really wanted to say to Glenn and to Mark and to Dane and to all the team really here is thank you very much for all the tremendous cricket you've played so far this season. It's been a great season. Sadly not quite winners, but really well done. And I do accept what you say, I do personally, about all the challenges, about the rest times and the elite fitness that players are today. I do think they are very different athletes to what they were before. So all that said, when we agreed to go from 16 to 14 only a few years ago, it was for this reason, to give player rest, player welfare, and put that first. And most county members went along with that, even at the expense of the lack of integrity of the county championship. So we really must have some certainty that this 100 doesn't expand, because we gave the players more rest and we got the 100 instead. And now we've got big problems. And as Daniel's just said, it's out of our control whether that problem gets bigger. And Strauss seems to be saying the 100's here to stay, it's best versus best, and everything else has to work around it. So it seems to me the big fear and why so many of us are so vexed about this is that one day Lancashire County Cricket Club will be eased out of existence, that these franchises will gradually take over, we'll have no say in that, that'll be done by people outside our control, and before we know where we are, there'll be 10, 12 franchises owned by extremely wealthy people, and us 10 to 12 remaining member-owned counties will be struggling along as very poor relations, and hundreds of years of tradition could just simply disappear out the window. And I don't see anything that's going to get in the way of that, and that's what worries me the most. So anything Daniel can say about that would go down really well, particularly because the club is giving a 5-day season ticket offer to anybody, and you can use 4 of those matches to watch the Manchester Originals. So in theory, in 3 years' time, we could have 10,000 members here that are all actually Manchester Originals fans. So you get this room and say, well, what cricket do you want in future? And they say, well, we'll have more of this white ball stuff. Let's play it in June. Let's play it in July. And none of us older people will all get outvoted in 3 years' time. So don't you see there's a danger in that, Daniel, in what you're doing with that membership offer that's allowing this whole white ball frenzy to feed on itself and ultimately see Lancashire go out of business?
No, I don't. I understand the concern. I don't agree with it, though. I think it's our job to get more people to come to cricket, because if I don't get a younger audience coming to cricket, Lancashire cricket will die by its own accord, because there won't be any members here in 10, 15, 20 years. Our job is we have to get the white ball fans in, whether that's 100, whether it's T20, and we have to convert them. It's our job as a club to convert them to the 4-day game. That's what we have to do alongside. If you look at membership surveys, the number one response has always been, we want a membership growth plan, we want more members. I don't think it's fair to say, well, I just want red ball members, because ultimately the quickest and fastest way for us to get more people engaged with the club is through the white ball game. But our commitment is we have to do our very best to make red ball attractive, interesting, and we have a conversion job to do on those people once we've got them in the door. So I think that's why I don't believe that it will see us attracting more members through white ball cricket. We'll see the end of Lancashire cricket because we have to convert them. I think in terms of your other point, I was just reflecting again on your earlier point, which I think is important, is that because there is a majority of counties, I believe, at the moment that would not vote for county championship matches to be played in August. By that, if you follow that logic, that means that if you increase the schedule period of the 100 above its current 32, 33 days, that would automatically mean that we'd end up having to reduce the county championship further, and that again would require a 12 out of 18 majority. So I think, to give you a bit of comfort, I think that anything that squeezes the county championship is going to come back to the counties. So I think that, just thinking about it, I think that should give you a bit of comfort. Okay, do we have any other questions? This chap here.
Thank you very much. And if I may move us from the 100 back to points that Sam and Glenn have mentioned, and that's about players' welfare. The game seemed to be stuck in this pattern of 11 o'clock starts for most of the season, and then no matter what, 2 hours after play, everyone decides it's going to be 40 minutes for lunch. And then after they've flogged themselves hard for 4 hours, they'll allow 20 minutes recovery for what's called tea. That's rather strange. Most of us in this room have started work in our working lives before 9. Is it not worth pushing back to the ECB the merits of 10:30 starts throughout the season? So that gets over the problem of late finishes and hitting the motorway well after 8 o'clock at night. And what about a better balance in the day between lunch and tea? 30-minute intervals instead, so that it's evenly split for every 2-hour chunk of play. Simple as that. Whether it's got any merits or not is up to you gentlemen to decide.
I don't mind, do you? No, I don't mind. 10:30 is fine. 30 minutes for lunch, 30 minutes for tea is fine. I don't think it makes any difference. I don't think you need as much food at tea, so you need less time. So I don't think it's that big a deal.
Thank you. I think this gentleman here has got a question. Guys, hang on 1 second. Microphone coming your way.
This is more about process than anything else. Can I just say that I attend interminable meetings and forums, and I usually come away thinking that's 2 hours of my life I'm never going to get back. But thank you, Lancashire members, because it's been informative, it's been civil, and I've thoroughly enjoyed the experience. I noticed I had an email through to say that there's a special general meeting in October, and so my question is about process. Throughout the conversations, there's been a lot of ideas, many conflicting ideas that have come forward. Can you tell me the purpose of the special general meeting? The forum has been a lively debate. Is it going to, who is going to generate the questions? Because unless I'm wrong, I see now that we have a yes or no answer to the ECB. Actually, you know, we've got a note in part because large swathes of the high performance review, everybody, there seems to be a consensus, and those have gone through from the Kookaburra Board to the performance issues around the welfare of the players. So what is the purpose really of the special general meeting? What are we going to do? And how is the question or the proposal to the ECB going to be decided?
I think it's a really good question. I think, in short answer, I'm not entirely sure why we're having an SGM. I think we made a commitment to, and we've made it numerous times, that when there is a proposal that is going to a chair's vote that Lancashire are prepared to vote on, we would give members a vote on that proposal before the chair does that vote. We've made that commitment multiple times. And we've said that as soon as we get information, we'll share it with members, and we'll have members' forums to discuss it. Sadly, you know, we have a vocal minority of a small group of members, and we have a small group of members who called an SGM, requisitioned an SGM the day before the high performance proposal was published, which kind of makes me wonder, if I was asking a question, what is your objective to achieve when we've already committed that we're going to give a vote on the high performance proposal that eventually goes back to the ECB for approval to the members? So what is an SGM attempting to achieve? So genuinely, I'm not entirely sure. I think it feels like there's a few people that are grumpy that want to call an SGM for the sake of having an SGM. And I find it a bit odd, frankly, because if the final objective is there are certain things that are really important to me as a member that the club doesn't support or does support in terms of a final high performance review vote, then we've committed to doing that. So I'm a bit, I have to say I'm a bit confused. We've had 100 signatures, we've had a requisition, we will have an SGM on the 12th of October at 7 p.m. to vote on 2 specific narrow resolutions. But frankly, it was requisitions the day before the high performance proposal was published. So I'm not entirely sure of the point. No, it's not the case, because people don't realise, people think, you know, it's an SGM is governed by rules that were written over 100 years ago. So it actually, having a members forum, we've committed to a vote. We can call a members forum at any moment. We can run a digital vote as well as a postal vote. We have time, we can plan things, we can do things. When the ECB communicate, when they change their timetable, it gives us flexibility to respond to things that we don't know. The problem with an SGM is you have to confirm a date within 14 days. You have to have completed the SGM within 28. But the most challenging element of it is you have to physically post. This is why rules that were written 100 years ago, physically post papers, including proxy forms, within 14 days. 14 days prior to the SGM date. And when you've got postal strikes and when you've got to get papers actually agreed legally with a lawyer and overseen by our auditors, and then goes to print, then has to go to a fulfillment house, you can see that actually it's really narrow and really challenging and a very, very inflexible mechanism to achieve your end objective. So no, it's not the purpose to vote on the HPR or to determine what goes forward to the eventual chair's vote, because we've said in our statement, if there was a chair's vote demanded tomorrow, the club would be voting against the current proposal. So ultimately, there will be a process of negotiation with the ECB now between the counties. We will try and get some changes to the domestic schedule that we think are a compromise that are reasonable enough for us to bring back to the membership. We'll then give the membership a formal vote on that, and that vote will determine how we vote at the chairs meeting. So, you know, and having members forums and the ability to have a digital vote gives us much more flexibility time-wise than how quite a narrow SGM, what that actually achieves. We have another question at the back.
So just to respond to the answer to the last question, obviously that's your perspective, Daniel, I respect that. So the reason why many people want to have a special general meeting, and it may well be a minority, vocal or otherwise, is that the issue I raised earlier in my question, this whole thing goes to the heart of what we are as a cricket club. And this debate isn't really, for us, for those who are most concerned about it, really about 14 or 12 days. I appreciate from Sam and the players' point of view, all those rest points, I think they're perfectly valid. That's not what worries us. What worries us is this creep, as I just explained to you, Daniel. And there seems to us to be very little in the way of stopping the momentum of putting not just this county, but many other counties out of existence. Strauss was told by lots of senior people within the game that those proposals that he put out for consultation in August would kill a number of counties. He was told that in plain English, and yet they've still appeared. They've dodged around, they were published, they weren't published. You said they were published the other day, but Strauss was on the TV during the test match talking about them non-stop. So the PR war, the battle for hearts and minds on this has been going on well before. And what we've all learned is that if we're on the back foot, if we're not taking every opportunity to articulate and to give members the chance to say how they feel, that the county chiefs could go away in the winter, behind closed doors, and do any agreement. The 100 was brought in such a terrible way. I've spoken to senior people in the ECB who say they can't believe it was allowed to happen. I mean, they know how it happened, they just can't believe it was allowed to happen. And we just don't want to see a repeat of that. So what you're having to deal with, really, is an extremely low level of trust, generally, around the place. Now, we can work together to build that and to have more meetings like this. I agree, these are good. But the club's also chopped and changed. At the first forum, Daniel, you promised a binding vote. You said we would have that, and I took that at face value. And then there was an SGM call by the club where the chairman wrote in his piece, he talked about factions in the membership, which I thought was really unfair. He talked about factions and he said, this is one group of members against another. We'll listen to you. Of course we'll listen to you. But he rode back from the binding vote in that first SGM on the 30th. So we just need to come together and work together and stop calling each other one group versus the other. We've got similar concerns, and if we work together, we can find the solutions. And that's what I appeal to the club's management to do, is to work with the members on this, bring us all together, and we'll come out the other side a stronger and better club.
Okay, look, I'm not going to engage more directly on this. I don't necessarily agree that the chairman rode back. I think the most important thing is the question I was asked is around why we're having an SGM. And I answered purely from a process perspective around limitations and inflexibility around an SGM. And actually that I have come out on numerous occasions and said the members will get a binding vote on any proposal that goes back to a chair's vote. You know, that's something I've said on numerous occasions, and the club has also said on numerous occasions. We will, as soon as we get updates on the information, we will immediately call members' forums and have those open discussions and debates. So my only point was around process, and I think work with us, let's have members' forums, let's have these discussions, and we have absolutely committed that prior to any chair's vote on a proposal with the ECB, that we will give the members a binding vote. Okay, I think it's been a really good discussion, but we're going to wrap it up there, and I'd like to thank you all for your time. And if you could give a round of applause to the panel for giving up their time this evening as well, I appreciate it. Thank you.